Good morning, everybody. This is episode 4 of the Off Topical podcast. My name is Gardiner.
And I'm Ryan.
And did Amazon just do something that makes me actually respect them? Plus, Valve released the Steam hardware survey for September. Am I disappointed in the numbers? And Ethan Lee puts FNA in indefinite maintenance mode. This and more on today's Off Topical podcast. But first, the Off Topical podcast is now available as an RSS feed. Subscribe at offtopical.net and become a member of the Off Topical crew today. Now, let's get to the good stuff. All right, so our first story is Ethan Lee is putting FNA in maintenance only mode. Ryan, how about you tell us what FNA actually is?
I have this thing where sometimes I learn things exist when they die. And I'm not saying that this is dying because that doesn't really do justice to what's happening. But FNA is apparently a free and open source implementation of Microsoft's XNA game development framework, which I can tell you as someone who experimented with the XNA game framework back I was in high school, and it was not a bad toolkit. So apparently FNA allows folks to port their XNA games to other platforms, including our favorite platform, Linux.
Right. And so this framework was actually developed by Ethan Lee over the last 6 or so years. And it's allowed 40 plus amazing games to actually make the leap from, using this proprietary framework to using a open source one. Games like Celeste, Fez, Transistor, Salt and Sanctuary, Interloper, Terraria, Bastion, and a bunch more. I mean, most of these games are on my top 10 list.
I was going to say, Bastion, I had no idea. I just had absolutely no idea.
Yeah. And I think even Towerfall Ascension, which is one of my favorite games of all time, uses this framework. So, I mean, it's really potent what Ethan has created. And at this point, I mean, FNA is rather mature. Like he says in his Google Plus post, FNA 18.10 is the first release of FNA where I can say that I'm happy with every single part of the framework, right? That's really cool. I mean, I don't think I've ever done a coding project where I'm happy with every single part of it.
Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah, so looking through this, I'm happy that he's happy, and like it says here, FNA is already complete, and then he's like, bug free, probably not.
Yeah.
But he says FNA bugs are pretty easy to diagnose and fix, though at least nowadays. But now that it's complete, I think it's time to lock it down and put it into maintenance mode indefinitely.
Right.
I don't know how I feel about that. Maintenance mode to me sounds like killing off a project, and it sounds like, given the games that were able to move over to Linux because of this work, it's this to me is a sad thing. I don't know about you, but on this list I played Fez and Bastion, and they were good. They were good ports.
Oh yeah.
I didn't have any real issues with them, so maybe this is some of the fallout of Proton, is that when we have a great implementation like this that allows you to actually port your game, I don't want people to forego that because Proton is easier.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, and I've heard people talk about this, and it's a legitimate reason to take pause. I think the fact that Proton is quote not a native thing, and it might prevent or not encourage native ports. I mean, that's a legitimate fear. Kind of unwarranted, I think, especially when FNA is already, a mature technology that developers can target as they're developing their games with XNA. Given the fact that he's putting it in maintenance only mode, I think that gives us, I think that gives me a little bit of hope that other developers can use what he's built to bring their games to Linux natively.
And maybe some of that work will be incorporated into Proton. He says As for what's next, I'm still in the mood to save old games, so I'm currently figuring out how to deal to work on Proton as an official developer alongside my usual Linux native work, which I'd be really interested to know who he's working that deal out with.
Yeah.
But if we do figure something out, and then he says a bunch of background stuff has to happen before we get the paperwork drafted, let alone signed, I'm going to be working on Wine's migration to FAudio as well as Wine's .NET support, which should help out a lot with games that have C#-based launcher programs.
Yeah.
But what I wonder is he going to be able to incorporate some of the technology that he's already incorporated in FNA in Proton? Like, wouldn't it be great if, as part of Proton, games that use XNA, if they just were able to take advantage of some of the work that he's done, maybe to make native API calls. I don't really know how that looks, and I have not looked at the source code.
Right.
So I'm just talking out my ass. But it seems like if somebody's going to be helpful to this project, it would be someone like this.
Definitely. I mean, I completely agree. When I read this originally, my first thought was yes, because he does seem like the kind of guy who puts in the work and is capable of producing some great stuff. And the idea of him working on Proton and porting over Wine, migrating Wine to FAudio, and including .NET support in Wine, which right now is pretty not great, especially for some later iterations of .NET. Like, it's definitely something that he's got the experience with .NET. I mean, he really does, and so that's pretty awesome.
Can I say something that I'm kind of excited that 10 years ago, or even more recently than that, you're working on Wine, and you never think it's going to lead to a job prospect.
Right.
Like,
oh yeah.
It's just, you're just doing it because you're like, I really wish this game worked, on the operating system I like to use. And then it's like suddenly one day, Valve, and we're going to get to this later, but maybe even Google are putting money into this thing. Like, it's a crazy world that we live in.
Absolutely.
And
I'm wondering if the acronym FNA, is that an acronym or is that an abbreviation? I don't know. But is FNA supposed to sound like FNA?
Yeah, that never crossed my mind. But now you've put a kernel in my head that I'm never going to be able to get out, because first off, every time I see FNA, I'm going to say it that way. Mm-hmm. Secondly, is XNA an acronym? And if so, is it Xbox something? Because it was originally aimed at developing for the Xbox, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
XNA.
I'm going to Google it now.
I am too. Let's see.
XNA is not acronym. That's what it stands for.
XNA is not an acronym?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's of course.
I gained a little bit more respect for them after that.
Yeah, exactly. It's very GNU-ish.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't expect that. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Steam hardware survey that just got released. It's pretty interesting. The Linux usage on the Steam survey has increased by 0.12%. And for perspective, the latest total number of Steam users I could find was 125 million active users, which would roughly translate to about 225,000 Steam users who are on Linux. So that's an interesting number. What do you think about that, Ryan?
It doesn't surprise me. I always hope that the number is just going to shoot up.
Yeah.
And like, I'm going to be on top of the table, like screaming in happiness. But that's how I express my happiness. This is positive. And I will say, all of my friends who work in tech have a Linux machine, or are familiar enough with Linux that they play around with it once every, couple of months.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of them said, yeah, I think I'm going to play around with Proton. I don't know how many of them actually went ahead and did that, but I know that they were tuned into this news and that they were interested. And every time something changes in Linux gaming, they know that I'm interested in it, so they talked to me about it, and they said, this is really cool. Like, if I can play insert game here on Linux, I could probably switch to Linux,
Yeah.
And so this is kind of one of those things where, just to give your younger viewers perspective, I can't believe I'm saying this. I think that that's like the worst thing I've ever said out loud.
I turned 30 in November, so I feel you.
Yeah. You're older than me?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. All this time.
Daddy Linux, as they call me in the comments.
Oh, God. I didn't know that. Okay. Well, anyway, watching Linux grow, it's been one small victory and then another small victory and another one. It compounds and builds and things have changed, and then you look back and you're like, wow, what the heck happened, Yeah. And so I'm hoping gaming on Linux is the same way, is it's just a bunch of small victories that ultimately result in, us looking back and saying, oh, yeah, it was self-evident.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in the short time I've been doing my channel, I've been doing my channel for 4 years. And the number of small victories that we've achieved, when I look back at where I started, like, we had like, the big game was Portal 2 that had just come out when I started my channel, I think. And so it's like, and since then we've had so many awesome, massive and small games from a bunch of different publishers who are all interested in getting their game in front of people so that they can have fun on whatever platform they want. And
doesn't that seem quaint? Like, that seems like,
yeah.
It seems like a long time ago, and it also seems quaint. Like, we got Portal 2, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
It's still a big deal that we got that. But now it's like, wow, I look and I've got 100 games in my library that I can play that are all fantastic titles.
I'm coming up on 400 games in my library that are like Linux native, and it's incredible. I never thought we'd get to this point. I remember when Valve first announced Steam machines and everything, and I was so excited about it. And to see where Steam actually went with Steam machines and how that kind of like fell off, that's history now. Where I remember clear as day, I was using, I think it was Ubuntu, 12 or 13. And I was like, dang, I can't wait to see where this goes. Forever ago, I mean, I honestly, and I feel like Ubuntu 10.10 was just around the corner. I was like really excited for that.
I remember I went and I built a machine the day of the announcement. I went to Micro Center. I bought all the parts to build a new desktop. The day that, I guess this was more like the week that SteamOS was available.
Yeah.
And I installed SteamOS on it, and I invited my friends, close friends and family that were techie over, and we played some games on it, and and this is a bit of a tangent, but I thought that was it, like that it would not be that long till Steam machines were a viable console alternative.
Yeah.
And that didn't quite happen, but then, looking back on it now, I do, like I said, I do compare it to how Linux grew. We have these things happen, and then another thing happens, and then another thing happens, and soon it's the platform.
Right.
And so yeah, it's this is good news. It's not as big as maybe it could have been, but that's still a lot of users. 225,000 approximately.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and I mean, to put that into a little bit more perspective, that puts us in the ballpark of like 1.1 million people who are using Steam on Linux. And I fully, like, for the last couple of years, we've seen that number slowly go down. And I think it has been because like the Steam, the Linux representation on the Steam survey. And I think that has been because people have been more interested in playing Windows games in Wine.
Yeah.
That, even though they're on Linux, and when they were doing that, it was counting as Windows users. The fact that Valve has tackled that problem has shifted the numbers to a place where I thought they should be. So I mean, and according to Gaming on Linux, this is a 14-month high for this metric. So that's pretty interesting. I suspected we'd see an increase of about this size. I thought it might have been a little bit larger. But yeah, I think that we're going to see this number continue to grow, and I'm anxious to see where Valve heads with their Linux push. I don't know. It's fascinating. This is really interesting stuff.
So just to reiterate, because I want to get this as many places as possible before it happens, Valve is going to release a streaming service.
I don't
like what we saw from Google. And this is all just part of the plan to make it so that you can run these games on Linux servers so that they can stream properly to, the games. I just want to put that out again because I know that here in how many months, 3-6 months, it's going to roll out, and I just want to be able to say, look at what I said. And then, if I come back on this podcast, and when it happens, I want you to play what I said now again, so I can do a victory lap.
I mean, I'll fully admit when I'm wrong, and I think we'll get to the discussion about streaming services a little later, and why I'm skeptical of them. But you could be right, and I'll definitely, if time proves you correct on this, then I'll fully admit that I'm wrong.
Like I said, it's either that or they actually are going to produce a first-party Steam machine.
Yeah. Which,
let me be honest, that is my preferred.
Yeah.
Outcome. But I do think that this streaming thing is on the up and up. People are interested in that, or companies are interested in that because they want to be the Netflix of games.
Yeah. All right, let's move on here. So we have a couple new announcements from Feral Interactive. If you're not familiar with Feral, then you probably are new to the Linux community. But Feral actually are a porting house. They bring over lots of different games, AAA titles for the most part, over to Linux and Mac OS too. And they have just announced that Total War 3 Kingdoms and Life is Strange 2 are coming to Linux. These aren't my kind of games. Have you ever played any of these games, Ryan?
No. Total War probably is my kind of game, but I've only lived vicariously through other people who have played it.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of over my head on the strategy spectrum, and Life is Strange, I played the original. It's not my jam. I don't know. They just released Life is Strange Before the Storm, and I didn't get a chance to play that. But based on the original title, I wasn't interested. But I think it's great to see Feral announcing new projects, especially since many people feared, the state of native games after Valve brought Proton to market. I don't know. I think this is great news. I'd like to see them bring, other genres to Linux, because they seem to focus on strategy and games like Life is Strange,
Why do you think that is? First off, do you think that there's evidence to support that? Maybe the games that perform the best for Feral are, for instance, strategy games?
Well, the kind of games that they've brought to Linux are Deus Ex and Hitman. They brought a bunch of Total War games, a bunch of Warhammer stuff, and a couple Life is Strange titles. A lot of these games are owned by Square Enix, so they have a great relationship with Square Enix. And so it probably has to do with the interest of the publisher to bring the game to Linux, the interest of the developers to actually port the game, and probably also the demographics of who's going to be playing their game and on what platform. So there's probably a bunch of politics that goes on, I would say. Corporate politics, management politics, but also like demographics.
Yeah, I will say that, and I have no data to back this up, but just based on anecdote, but just going around and talking to my friends who do use Linux full time, a lot of them are strategy game buffs. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some data internally to Faro where they're like, our strategy games perform pretty well.
Yeah.
You know, like we should target more strategy games. I did play Hitman. I loved Hitman. I did not expect to love Hitman. And if they were going to have a relationship with the publisher, I do love that they do have a relationship with Square Enix, mostly because I'm still looking to play Final Fantasy XIV on my Linux machine. I purposely stopped playing it because I couldn't play it on Linux.
Yeah.
And but if they brought it over, you know, if a Faro guy is listening, or gal, I'm down. Just bring it and I'll play it.
Nice.
But yeah, I do think this is good though. To take a more top level view, like the fact that they're bringing games over natively still after the Proton announcement is positive. Granted, they would have had this in the works before that announcement, right?
Oh yeah.
But I'm eager to see how Faro fares following this. They do have other businesses, right? Like they bring games to iOS.
Yeah.
But this is good news. I still think this is good news, and I may pick up one of these games just to vote with my dollar.
Yeah, I feel you there. This is some interesting news right here. Chris Ware is stepping away from his YouTube channel for a while to take a well-deserved break. Chris Ware Digital. He's a British guy, and if you haven't seen his stuff, I highly recommend it. He seemed pretty emotional as he broke down the reasons he was stepping away from his channel. In a 24-minute video, he touched on various reasons for stepping away. Chief among them was he said that YouTube's algorithm and the requirements YouTube places on creators are changing, fluctuating under his feet, and honestly, I feel for him. He stated that he needs to refocus his show. And Ryan, I'm not sure if you're familiar with YouTube's algorithm, but have you heard people talk about like how it changes and it's so fickle?
Yeah, when I was at CES, I spoke to a couple of folks at YouTube about this. At the time, there was a lot of Linux guys who were having issues with their channel, and so I was like, "Hey, this is really frustrating to the Linux community." And of course, I don't know if they cared at all, but it was. CES is in Vegas. I was kind of inebriated. And so I decided to point my finger at them and be like, hey, my creators are really getting a raw deal on your platform. And so, yeah, I'm familiar with some of the problems that YouTube creators have on that platform.
Yeah. And to be honest, I was in the same boat Chris was in a couple months ago. I felt like I was at a crossroads, honestly. My viewership was down. And the amount of work I was putting into my reviews just didn't seem justified. I'd spent 10 hours playing a game, 3 hours writing a script, another 3 hours to edit the video, and then an hour to make a thumbnail just to have 600 people watch it, And I'm not saying anything negative about 600 people watching. Some people would kill to have 600 viewers. But it really bummed me out, It made me feel like I was not investing my time wisely. And some people out there might say, but your Patreon supporters pay you to make videos, so it doesn't matter how many people are watching them, right? But that's not really sustainable. If you ask any creator, not only does it take an emotional toll on you, if nobody watches the videos that you make, and that includes your patrons, then eventually my patrons will stop being patrons, I don't know. Chris, I'm available to talk if you want to talk. I feel you right there, and there's always an open chair for you here on the podcast, so I missed your stuff already, man. I love your videos, and I can't wait to see where you go with the channel. If you guys haven't seen his stuff, check out youtube.com/ChrisWareDigital.
So while you were talking, I went and checked out his stuff, and I have seen some of his stuff.
Yeah.
I want to say that I used Linux in high school, but it wasn't until I started seeing YouTube videos and podcasts where other people were talking about their experience with Linux that I was, I don't know, activated, I guess.
Right.
I felt alone. You know, I was from rural Missouri. Like, I had no one who cared about this besides me. And like, eventually I did meet people, but it wasn't until after I had already discovered some early, media, Linux media. And so I can't tell you how important it is from my own perspective that guys like you and Chris are around, because, I want another kid from rural wherever to be able to, connect, even if it's just kind of this one-way thing, at least like know that the things you're interested in aren't just like this weird. I mean, it is kind of weird to be passionate about Linux, but it's weird in a good way.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And so, but I wouldn't be where I'm at in my career. Now I get paid, let's be honest, like lots of money to like talk about open source software. So like, but without that positive media that, like was a great place to kind of learn more, I don't know that I would be here. I don't know where I would be. But so it is very sad to see somebody feel like they need to walk away from creating that media.
Yeah, and to be totally clear on this, he's not done with his channel, but he has to. He said in his video that he has to refocus what he's doing, and before he does that, he's going to take a break, and he doesn't know how long that break's going to be. So, Chris, it can't be understated how important people like you are, Chris, because when I was a young lad, one of my favorite TV shows, or one of my favorite shows, was the Linux Action Show. And when Chris and Bryant were doing that, they were my frickin' idols, man. Oh my God. I watched every single episode. I watched every episode of TechSnap. I was a huge fan. And it really helped influence me. It helped me get a job doing IT like I do now. It helped me it inspired me to start my YouTube channel. And it also helped me in the very beginning actually make the switch from Linux, or from Windows to Linux. And that can't be understated, how important people that do this kind of work are. So Chris, take a break, and I can't wait for you to get back, my friend.
Agreed.
All right, Ryan, you want to take this next one?
So, Google is debuting its test streaming service, which was called Project Yeti. Now it has a name. It's called Google Stream. Honestly, like, I wish they would have stuck with Yeti. But
yeah.
The deal is that you'll be able to stream AAA titles. Right now it's just Assassin's Creed Odyssey on your Chrome browser. This is very interesting. Like, I have to say, I've been following this for a while, and so I knew that they were working on a streaming service. However, I guess seeing it rolled out this way was not exactly what I expected. So right now there's just one title, and they're opening it up to, like, I guess you'd call it maybe like a beta, a closed beta of the service. I've said this before, this isn't exactly the future of gaming that I want, but I see this being something that companies would be interested in and want to try. Like I said in our earlier segment, I think a lot of companies want to be the Netflix of video games. And to make that happen, I feel like this is how you have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical of this entire endeavor, no matter who's doing it. It failed with OnLive. I don't know how successful it is with PlayStation. but I think there are three major problems with this kind of service. The first one is lag in a single player game. And everyone complained when Diablo 3 had lag in a single player game. It's absurd. And but the fact is, you know, they're going to be running the game on their server and sending you a highly compressed image that, you know, represents what you're playing. The problem is, it's like, what happens when your bandwidth like just kind of poops out for a minute? You end up with lag in a single player game. The second problem is that I see is the high compression problem, because one of the things that I love the most about playing on a nice big 1080p screen is the fact that like you have this gorgeous uncompressed image on your screen, right? If you like play a game, let's say, I'm trying to think of a good one here. What's a good game with like lots of particle effects? Let's say you play Doom 2016, right? You're playing it on your nice big 1080p television, or maybe even 4K. And then you switch over to watching a YouTube video of the same game. It looks like trash when you compare them one to one, because one is a direct, uncompressed video stream, and the other is highly artifact compressed, like just terrible MPEG quality. And there is no comparison in my book, especially when you know, if the stream quality of the game you're playing drops really low. One of the problems that I have with the friggin' Nintendo Switch is the fact that like the dynamic resolution changes all the time, right? So the Nintendo Switch, I don't know if you heard about this. Like if you're playing Doom or Wolfenstein or even Breath of the Wild on your Switch, and there's a lot of action on screen, to keep the frame rate up, the resolution actually scales down to a lower resolution, which means that the quality of the image actually diminishes while you're playing the game. And it's an uncanny look that I hate. And I think I'd rather have a choppier frame rate than a lower resolution image, personally. So that's a big problem. And the third problem with this streaming service is input lag, because, and this is something that Google is trying to tackle with this, is input lag. But I don't think that there's going to be I don't think we'll ever reach a happy medium with input lag. And I'm highly skeptical about it. The only thing that I can think that Google would do to mitigate input lag is predictive input, where the server is going to try and guess what you're going to do next. That is something Google would do. And at that point, are you even really playing a game? Or is the server playing the game for you?
So there are a few things there. I think the first one is, like, this isn't like a crazy project that just sprang up overnight. Apparently, they've been working on it for 2 years, and they've even hired executives from like PlayStation in order to help work on it. I think that you're right in that. Okay, so I used OnLive.
I did too.
And I played Arkham Knight with it, and I didn't really experience any major issues. I don't know what your experience was. Maybe you could share that, but I had a fairly good time with it. No major problems. I don't remember my exact experience. I just remember not being completely frustrated with it. And of course, the reason I did it is because I wanted to be able to game on Linux and on, other platforms that weren't Windows.
See, I had a Google TV, and I side-loaded the OnLive app onto my Google TV.
Oh, did you?
And I had a Time Warner like 15 or 20 megabit connection, and it was not great. It was actually, in fact, pretty awful. And connections would drop. I'd lose, I'd lose connection to the server, or like the server would just be, or the stream quality would just be so poor that I couldn't even make out what was going on in the game really. And then the fact that with OnLive you actually had to buy a copy of the game in order to play it, like it just was not. It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. So it's interesting that they chose Assassin's Creed Odyssey for the game that everybody plays with. Maybe that's because they wanted to choose a hard one.
Yeah.
To try to work out some of the problems. But this strikes me as a casual gamer's thing. The reason I say that is because I have a quote from the Ars Technica write-up on this. Yeti has supposedly been in the works for over 2 years, with executives from the Google hardware team leading the project. Let's think about that for a second. The Google hardware team.
Yeah.
For now, Google is sidestepping the hardware question with a test on Chrome, but internal versions of Yeti have been considered for the Chromecast or gaming-specific hardware. Connecting a controller to the second-gen Chromecast would be difficult since it only supports Wi-Fi and USB. But an unannounced third-gen Chromecast with Bluetooth on board recently started popping up at Best Buy.
Interesting.
So the reason I say that is because I think that this would appeal to maybe not the hardcore gamer, but I think about the parent situation where what's easier to do? Sign up for some kind of service where your kids can use the Chromecast to stream, games, or go out and buy a PlayStation 4. That may sound weird, but think about how long it takes paying $25 a month or something like that to eclipse the cost of a dedicated piece of hardware.
Yeah.
I think it takes long enough that I think it's that people, especially people who don't care. Unfortunately, a parent who might not care as much about like what the quality is of their kids playing the game, like are just like, yeah, this is simpler. That's why Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a weird first one out. I would have expected something more casual, but
Yeah.
like I said, maybe this is some kind of way to test, to see like, okay, this is a AAA high quality game. Like, what's the experience with this?
Yeah. I mean, definitely like the high quality graphics and all that stuff is something that, that's something to consider. I think, stress testing it and putting it in front of like hardcore gamers who are going to push the service to its limits, that might be like what they're trying to do here. I'm wondering like why the Google hardware team has been leading the project, because, if you think about, if you think about when the Xbox One originally launched and what they talked about doing with the Xbox One and the cloud services, where part of the image would be rendered by the local hardware and part of the image would be rendered in the cloud, maybe something like that is what they might end up doing, and that might help with lag. I'm not sure. I mean, it's interesting. On principle, I will never do this. I'm the kind of weirdo who still buys Blu-rays and music on disc. So I need to like own my stuff. I can't rent it.
Yeah, I gotta say that first off, I think that because it's being led by the Google hardware team, and they kind of hint there that internal versions of Yeti have been considered for the Chromecast or gaming specific hardware. That sounds like a journalist who has maybe heard something, but can't. It wasn't on record, because I don't know why else you would say something that distinct but not actually say it.
Right.
If there was gaming specific hardware and it could load part of the game into the local memory or whatever while you were streaming it, like that would be really good. How do I feel about this at the end of the day? I don't want to have to run Chrome.
Yeah.
But I do own a Chromecast. But my computer is a little out of date, and it still runs the games okay, but the next time I went to get to upgrade my computer or to get a new computer that could run, the latest PC game, if this experience was good enough, it would definitely make me second guess my upgrade.
Well, I think we've covered this topic thoroughly. What about you?
Yeah. People could see our little notepad here. Like, we definitely have talked about it much longer than the space it takes up on our notes.
Yeah, definitely. Amazon is raising its minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now, some people might ask, why are you talking about this on your show? And I think that it's actually really important for the tech world. Every U.S. employee of Amazon, including temporary and seasonal employees, will be receiving at least $15 an hour going forward. And this includes employees of Amazon.com, their fulfillment services, and Whole Foods. But this does not include their contract workers like custodians and delivery drivers. So that's fascinating. I'd like to know what you think about this, Ryan.
I think this is very good. I'm glad that Amazon is taking this step. I think that the does not affect contract workers needs a big asterisk next to it.
Yeah.
Because I know some of their warehouses are run by companies that they've contracted out to. So I think that there may be a lot of workers who were interested in this when it was first announced, but may not be getting it may not actually affect them, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And, but all around, I think this is great. I think that when you look at statistics on how much money Amazon makes and how much money Jeff Bezos makes, it becomes really crazy that some of their employees are making minimum wage or were making minimum wage.
Yeah. And not only making minimum wage, but also Amazon is notorious for mistreating their employees too.
Yeah. They can't. This is very sad. So my laughing is because of how sad it is.
Yeah.
Because it sounds ridiculous, especially like Gardiner and I are in the U.S., and you think like this is not something that you would expect here. But there are warehouses where they use like cameras and machine learning to identify when someone is slacking off. And by slacking off, I mean if an employee talks to another employee, they get reprimanded. So talking is an offense.
Yeah. Or going to the bathroom and taking too long. Like that's also, I've heard stories about Amazon employees have to like pee in bottles because they don't get bathroom breaks, or they don't get breaks to eat. It's kind of crazy that stuff like that could happen in this country.
It is sad, and it does bother me too, because they have like armbands that vibrate when you're taking too long on a task.
Ugh.
And it's like I don't know. It's like this really dystopian, like techno future that you really hope doesn't exist, but then when you find out it exists, you're like, oh no. Like this is like technology is supposed to enable people to live fuller, more interesting and engaging lives. So when I see it used in this way, it's very sad to me.
Yeah.
This didn't come out of nowhere.
Oh, definitely not.
Jeff Bezos was being criticized by Senator Bernie Sanders, and Jeff Bezos makes essentially over $200 million a day.
Oh my God.
And so the fact that he couldn't pay his employees, above minimum wage was kind of ridiculous. I don't think anyone generates that much value in a day.
No, I don't think there's any person in the world who generates that amount of value for a company in a day.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I think that it's sad that there's not more equitable distribution of wealth amongst his organization.
Yeah. Because
I think that even from his own company, like people are more engaged and have more of a stake in the company when they're paid a reasonable amount. Like when they feel like they have more stake when they're being reimbursed for their time and effort at a rate that reflects what they put in.
Yeah.
And what Bernie Sanders had the act was called the Stop Bezos Act, but it stood for the Stop Bad Employers by Zeroing Out Subsidies Act. And what he argued was that a lot of these employees go on government programs like food stamps and Medicaid, and the act was kind of a show. It
had no chance.
Yeah, because of politics in the U.S., it had no chance of going through. But what it was saying that if an employer doesn't pay its employees enough to where they're above the line where they'd have to apply for government aid, that essentially the company would be taxed for whatever the government aid was that was provided to their employees. I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
Walmart a while back was called out because they have pamphlets in their break rooms for how to apply for food stamps and Medicaid.
Yeah.
It's like, welcome to your new job. Now let's teach you how to apply. Let's get you on the Medicaid and food stamps. But what that means is that the American taxpayer is subsidizing work for Walmart,
right?
Work for Amazon. It shouldn't happen. People should make enough money to be able to live.
Companies should pay their employees a livable wage. I mean,
yeah, that's exactly right.
And I strongly believe that if you can't take care of your employees, then you have no business having employees. I mean, that's like rule 101 in business. And I know some people are going to say, no, rule 1 is deliver value to your shareholders. And if that's your number 1 rule, I mean, I fundamentally disagree with that. The people are what's most important, no matter what you are doing in your life. If you're a CEO of a company, or if you're some missionary on the street, people are the most important thing in the world. And if you're not taking care of people that you have authority over, then you shouldn't have authority, in my opinion.
I agree. And I have a personal story here. I founded a company a couple of years ago, and there was 1 month that money didn't come through at the right time. Things were going really bad. And I went and I pulled my savings out to pay my employees. And it was not $7.25 an hour. It was a decent wage. And I thought that was fair. They're here. They're helping me achieve my vision. They need to be paid on time and a reasonable amount in order to, make this thing work. And so I guess this kind of thing is, Amazon did the right thing. The least paid employee makes $15 an hour, which is a decent wage. And I think that that's a really great thing that they've done. So, I don't want this to be an anti-Amazon story. They went ahead and they did a good thing.
Definitely. And I mean, Amazon also encouraged other companies to do the same thing. And I think that's awesome. They also said, which I'm less excited about, Jay Carney, the senior VP of Amazon Global Corporate Affairs, which, let me just say, is a terribly corporate title, said, we will be working to gain congressional support to for an increase in the minimum wage, in the federal minimum wage, sorry. The current rate of $7.25 an hour was set nearly a decade ago, and we intend to advocate for a minimum wage increase that will have a profound impact on the lives of tens of millions of people and families across this country. I like that, except for the fact that I don't like lobbying in any form, under any policy creator. I don't like lobbying, and I think politics should be free of monetary influence.
Yeah.
Call me an idealist, but I don't care if I agree with the corporation or I disagree with them. I don't want them putting their money into public policy.
It's good that they've done the right thing, and I hope that at the very least their example can inspire other companies to do the right thing.
I don't want to poo-poo on what they're doing right now, because I do think that it's good that they have decided on their own to increase the minimum wage for their company, for their employees. And I do hope that, what Bernie Sanders said on Twitter, he said, what Mr. Bezos has done today is not only enormously important for Amazon's hundreds of thousands of employees, it could well be a shot heard around the world. I would urge corporate leaders around the country to follow Mr. Bezos' lead. And I have to say I agree with Bernie Sanders on that. This could be a tipping point where we'll see other companies voluntarily increase their minimum wage. And I think that that's potentially awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think? Do you think we have time for some listener comments?
Well, we might not have time, but we should, but I feel like we should do it.
All right, that's fair enough. MGC Lab on Twitter asks, with how much Google and other companies know about us, how far do you personally go to try and protect your privacy?
I go pretty far. The other day I was having a conversation at actually the Libre Application Summit, which is a GNOME conference that happened here in Denver. And everybody thought, by the way I was talking, that I was like into like some weird stuff. And that's why, because I was telling them about how, you know, in certain places I use a VPN because I don't really want any third party like looking at what I'm doing on their network.
Yeah.
For instance, like coffee shops. You know, even like, maybe this is probably where they thought I was overly paranoid, but just visiting like friends, I guess, and staying at their house for the evening, like I just have something about having my searching and my what I do on the internet like just out there. It bothers me.
Yeah.
Like, and so I have like tracker blockers and stuff, and like granted, a lot of it's just like looking at websites like news websites and, you know, just really boring stuff. But something about it fundamentally, like, bothers me. And so, yeah, I use like tracker blockers like Ghostery and or DuckDuckGo's extension in Firefox. And I use DuckDuckGo for my search engine.
Yep.
And I use a VPN, you know, on networks that I don't control. And so I go pretty far to protect my privacy because it bothers me.
So the other day at work, I had to create a simple sign-up form on our website. It's a sign-up form for a giveaway. And we only asked for a couple pieces of information, right? We asked for your first and last name, your email address, and something else. I can't remember what it was. And when we finally got the results back with just those like 4 pieces of information, it was fascinating that you could infer a couple of things just by those simple pieces of information. First of all, when you would type in your first and last name, if you were on a computer, you'd just type in, you know, Gardiner and then Bryant, okay? But if you're on your phone, if on certain phones using certain virtual keyboards, if you typed in your name, Gardiner, it would put an extra little space at the end, right? And so by just collecting this one little tiny piece of data, I was able to like tell or approximate, make an educated guess at what kind of device they were using. I didn't track like what devices they were actually using. But just by I could tell if they were using a mobile device, if there was a space at the end of their name on this little piece of, on this little form. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating, guys. Everybody look at this. And people were like, that's not interesting at all. But when you really understand like how computers work and the vast amount of data that's being collected about you, every moment of your life now, especially when you live your life on computers or you go into public spaces where there are security cameras that are like building facial recognition models of every person who walks through frame. It's like you're crazy to not be paranoid, I feel like. Am I making sense?
Yeah. No, you're making perfect sense. And in fact, this was borne out when they found that many online retailers were charging different prices to different people based on what trackers had gathered about them.
Yeah.
So if you were rich, or if they had inferred that you were wealthy, you know, because of the device you used, because of, you know, where you were in the world, and because of all this stuff they collect on you, that really create some creepy profiles. Some retailers were taking advantage of that and saying, okay, well, this person can afford to pay $10 for this item instead of another person who comes and they're in a different bracket as far as like what they make, their socioeconomic status, I guess.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, we'll charge them $5 for this.
And it's not like that it's not that they're charging you that. They're predicting what they think the maximum you would pay.
Yeah, that's right.
For this item. So it's not like we're going to charge them more because they're wealthy. This is what they might think is an appropriate price for this item, which is more insidious and more disgusting to me.
Yeah.
Than just charging someone based on their wealth.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's manipulative.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
To answer the question, because I haven't answered yet, I use the DuckDuckGo privacy extension. I use Firefox because I don't trust Google as far as I can throw them. Let's see, what else do I do?
You use a Nextcloud instance. I use a Nextcloud instance.
Yes. I love Nextcloud, and I've been doing everything that I can to mitigate the influence and my dependency on Google's products and services. I just recently added the password manager to Nextcloud and the news app to Nextcloud. It's really awesome. I can't talk enough about how awesome Nextcloud is. It's one of my favorite things. In fact, that's another question that we have. Updates on your adventures with Nextcloud. That would be cool, since I'd likely be migrating from Google like that too in the next week. That's from Alex Siebes on Twitter, or Siebes. I'm not sure. How would you pronounce that, Ryan?
I think it's Siebes.
Siebes.
AL Gamer is his handle.
AL Gamer, that's right. So Nextcloud is awesome, and I just upgraded to the newest version, which, let me open up that real quick.
Now I'm looking too.
I'm running 14.0.1, and it's really cool. I like that it gives you like security warnings and tips in this little area up here. Actually, should probably take care of some of these. But yeah, it's awesome. Nextcloud, I don't know how I lived without it, honestly, because between Nextcloud and Plex on my home server here, most of my data needs are taken care of. I have this isn't necessarily about Nextcloud, but I have a Blu-ray drive in my server, and I rip all of my DVDs and my Blu-rays into my Plex instance, and it's a headless ripping situation where I put the disc in and it does it automatically for me, and it's really cool. But I can like stream all of my movies as if it's my own personal Netflix anywhere in the world. I'm actually really, really proud of that. But like, I just don't, and the fact that like Netflix even collects all this information about you, like the reason that Netflix has multiple accounts within your one account is so that they can like build profiles about what you like to watch versus the other people who are using your account, Right. And it's all about profiling you and manipulating you into doing what they want. Anyway, that's an old topic.
I got distracted for a moment because I looked at the version of Nextcloud I was running and was like, oh, I need to update.
What version are you on?
Well, I just updated from version 12 to 13, and now I need to do another update, I think.
That's awesome. Well, we have a couple other questions, but I think we're going to leave them for next time. If you have a question that you'd like answered, send me an email, gardiner@offtopical.net. Don't forget that the audio feed is now available at offtopical.net as well. And make sure you subscribe to get the latest episode every week. I want to thank Ryan for joining me today, man. Thank you.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
I did too. And this has been the Off Topical Podcast. I'm your host, Gardiner Bryant, and let's do it again sometime.
Yeah.